Who wouldn't want to conquer space? I think a lot of people want that feeling, when you are not just a tiny part of the universe like in Elite Dangerous or EVE Online, but your decisions can really change what happens. I love the Total War series, and my love for space showed in hundreds of hours in EVE Online, Elite Dangerous, and X4 Foundation. So I was really happy when Creative Assembly announced Total War Warhammer 40k. But the problem is, most likely there won't be any space battles, just like there were no naval battles in the recent games. And I really wanted to command the fleet, not just watch the two walls of ships crash into each other, but take part in a real tactical fight. So, yes, there is a home world, but the third part got a lot of negative reviews, and the old games are just, well, they're old. So, I decided to make my own Space RTS. And in this video, I will talk about my first month of development, where I built this kind of prototype. Of course, it's a pretty ambitious idea, not just an RTS but an RTS in a full 3D space. Orientation and controls are harder there, and it has to feel intuitive. At the same time, the game must leave room for tactics and variety. And my experience, well, 1 month of making a small 2D game. I understood what problems I would face, but understanding is one thing, and doing it is another. And so I started. For the first few days I didn't even open Godot. And yes, it might be an unusual engine choice, but Unity or Unreal would hardly give me a real advantage, I think, and I already knew Godot. So I spent those days thinking through the architecture and looking for assets on Fab. Past experience showed me that if you don't make something that looks good early on, motivation dies really fast. And there aren't that many free 3D sci-fi assets, especially ones that fit the universe of my books where I want to set this game. And since I still can't make my own models, I have to live with that limitation. Also, I wanted the code structure to be expandable and maintainable from day one, and especially optimized, because dozens of ships in one battle is a serious load. In the end, almost everything in the game works through method managers, a separate manager for movement, selection, sound, effects and so on. And this let me centrally limit how many effects, projectiles and sounds happen per tick, and also manage level of details. And after a month the system got noticeably more complex, but the foundation worked. After planning I started with movement. It had to be simple and intuitive but still leave room for tactics. I was partially inspired by EVE Online, and later I realized Homeworld had something similar too. There are two ways to control ships. So the first one is to set a point manually, with an angle and distance. And the second is to select a target and use a radial menu to set orbit, follow, attack or keep distance. At the start, of course, there were bugs, but the final system turned out pretty comfortable. You can set orbit radius, movement orders, don't fight with attack orders, and it's all visualized. However, I left an order queue for later. Later I realized that wasn't enough. I wanted a stronger feeling of control, so I added direct control. The ability to literally jump into a ship and fly it by yourself. The logic is different from the strategy mode, but it still shouldn't feel like a totally different game. It was harder than I expected. I'm also not sure yet how shooting should work in this state, and maybe the player will be able to just fly without shooting. And when the control worked, I move on to combat. In most space games ships shoot forward and turrets are less common. That makes sense because turrets make everything harder. You need to track rotation angles, give each turret its own target, check if it can hit or not, handle cooldowns for each turret and so on. But turrets can add more tactical depth. If a ship has big guns, they turn slowly. A small ship's guns can turn faster, so a small ship can move into a close orbit and become a harder target. That makes fleet composition important, not just take the biggest ship, because the big ship simply won't hit small targets. But this also creates a problem. Each turret is a separate logic entity. It has to choose target, understood if it can shoot it, consider aiming angles, synchronize with the ship. So it's not one AI anymore, it's like 10 inside one object. And all of that must be optimized, because turrets use raycasts, and a larger number of them can hit the CPU really hard. In the end, I implemented a priority system that the player will be able to configure later through the UI. These priorities include attack the closest target, the biggest target, the one with the lowest HP, the closest to the mission, or a specific target picked by the player. So, based on that, the ship builds a list of possible targets and distributes it between turrets. If a turret can't shoot, it asks the ship to change the position, and if the target is still not available even after turning, then it picks an alternative. The system is flexible enough, although sometimes ships turn their rear towards the enemy to shoot more efficiently, and that becomes a problem because I have local armor and vulnerable models. For example, you can destroy the engine and then the ship moves much slower, so the player must be able to disable this automatic turning. This makes positioning even more important. Shooting also has a lot of optimization limits like raycast limits, projectiles limit per stick, also limits of effect and sounds. And speaking of sounds were relatively simple. I bought a big library, made an Excel table that converts to JSON, and added text and parameters. Now, when the projectile hits, it asks the audio manager for a sound with the needed text. The system picks a random matching option and adjusts it based on the player's position. Effects were really harder, because Godot doesn't have a huge effect marketplace and the ones I bought on Fab were made for Unreal Engine, so porting them was not really trivial. So I decided to remake the effects almost from scratch using the textures. With the help of guides, I made a muzzle flash and then an explosion, and then I started taking a Godot VFX course. So yes, for this game I will need to learn a lot. So in a little more over 30 days I got a working prototype. Ships move, they follow orders, they shoot, turrets work and sounds work. There are basic effects and the architectural foundation is in place. So the next step is to polish combat, add decals, more weapons and ship variety, also collision avoidance and ramming, and also start working on the UI. There is a lot of work ahead. If you want to follow development, you can subscribe, leave a comment and join the Discord. And if you want to help, also join the Discord or email me. I'll be really happy to chat. Bye!